G'day pals, welcome back to a new video and the return of pixel art class. It's been a little while, and today I thought we'd make a really simple, easy glide back into the tutorial series with a video on clouds. Now, I haven't really done a cloud tutorial before, though clouds have appeared in some of my videos. So this is one that's very beginner friendly and one that I get asked about, frequently enough. So let's not waste any time and get into it. Okay, so you cannot talk about clouds in pixel art without talking about the OG Super Mario Bros. And its clouds. Famously, the clouds and the bushes share the same sprite. I'm not going to show you that here. You can go look that up if you're interested. So I think these are really a decent example of what I think of as like quintessential clouds in pixel art. Now, in real life, there are a lot of cloud formations. Cumulus clouds are the kind of default standard fluffy white situation that you see here. Very plainly, we've got kind of like a flat bottom and more of like a sort of cloudy, kind of like puffy sort of section on top. And that's usually made up of like multiple lumps that kind of like, make the overall silhouette. We kind of think about it as being more dense on the bottom than in the top, and light passes through clouds in a way that sort of reveals that density. So at the top, where it's less dense, it's usually brighter. Where it's more dense, sort of in the middle down the bottom, it's usually darker. For reference, these are the kinds of clouds that I'm talking about. And you can see there's kind of like this kind of like flat canopy, almost like a floor, where all of these clouds seem to be like cut off, right? It's very flat on the bottom, and then they're much more billowing and cloudy on top. Now in pixel art, there's actually a couple of different ways you can approach this. There's kind of like a beginner way and a more advanced way. And I think the beginner way thinks about clouds as objects, and the more advanced way thinks about clouds as parts of an entire sky. And that's made more difficult when you think about palettes and how to blend clouds in with the sky. So you've got these clouds which are white and gray, and you've got the sky which is kind of blue, light blue, as well as fading into white. And how you kind of mesh these, and especially when you work in dynamics like sunlight, sunsets, that's where things get a little more complicated. So here is some work from the game Chasm. I believe this was done by Tony Redmer, and you can see here how the clouds really make up the sky itself. It's kind of a hybrid actually. You can see like clouds, actual objects at the top here, and they have quite a high contrast with the sky behind them. But if you look closely, even the sky behind them is made up of clouds. And then kind of like a nice gradient representing that flat canopy cover, where we see the yellow transitioning through red towards the gray. Now this is kind of like an excellent time to talk about the kind of key, I think, lesson when it comes to this aspect, which is the role of dithering in clouds. Whenever you have a low contrast or area where you want to blend something in pixel art, the idea of how to actually blend comes into question. So dithering is an approach where you can take this kind of checkerboard pattern of pixels and use it to create transition colors or transition shades between two to soften that. And it works really well here. But you can also pick colors between the colors you want and sort of blend between them, as you can see down here. The third way, which is kind of a little more theoretical, abstract, which is to think about the act of creating shapes as dithering. Let's think about the cloud shapes themselves as being these kind of like dithering elements. So to get from this color here all the way to this color down here, what we're doing is kind of like transitioning with cloud shapes, right? All the way back. It's kind of like the sky is composed of clouds, and those arcs kind of allow us to accept what we're seeing, right? We buy it visually because we can see that, oh yeah, there's some clouds here and some clouds there and some clouds there. If we were to just use flat lines all the way up, this would be called banding, and it would be really obvious if you just picked 6 shades and divided them equally. So this is a way of kind of like roughing up and texturing in a way that actually has perceptual significance, right? It actually looks like something. Another example of probably one of the most famous artists for clouds on the internet right now is Jubilee. So I've seen tutorials by Jubilee all over the place, and I've seen people follow those tutorials and post them on the pixel art subreddit and stuff like that. They're extremely straightforward and very pleasant. And the textbook is that streak through the clouds. Whenever you see a streak like this, you know someone's copying Jubilee. So what we're seeing here is a little bit more towards the object side thinking about clouds more as objects than as a kind of texture within the sky. Although there is a little bit of blending going on here. You can see some cloud shapes in the background, just softening that transition. For the most part, we see the clouds as a shape. Forward from that, we're seeing that contrast be built up, those darker shades, darker tones of the same circle shapes. Now, what I really like here, I think what typifies this style is hue shifting. So the way that each layer of clouds has kind of like a little bit more blue or a little bit more pink, almost in alternation, gives us that really, really gorgeous kind of like pastel vibe. So here's an example that I found. It's a non-pixel art example, but it really demonstrates the sort of overall technique for this. Basically, as I mentioned, you have a flat bottom and you have one or two clusters of circles and never showing the underside of a circle. Whenever those circles sort of reach the bottom, they either get washed into like a flat color space or they get eaten into by another circle that's a little bit brighter or a little bit darker. That's how it works. So let's now get into some practice. Now, here we are in a sprite, and I'm going to start you off with a new canvas. We're going to make it 320 by 180, generally low resolution. Let's go RGBA. We will be building a palette, but we'll build it within an RGBA color space. If you don't see this spectrum here, you can go into the little menu here and press color spectrum. And we're just going to pick some colors and build out a little palette. So let's start with a color here. Medium saturation, full opacity, obviously, and some sort of like medium bright blue. Then we're going to shift down, and as we go down, we're going to head towards this sort of blue purple space here, and then shift down and a little bit towards dark blue, and the same again, down a little bit towards dark blue, same again, one more time. That should give us all the way. And then we want a little bit more space up top as well. So that's not a bad start. We probably won't need the really low end ones. If you want to add these to the palette, you can use the Alt key to bring up the eyedropper tool, and then click the colors and then hit the red exclamation mark, and that will add them to the palette list. And you can also sort them by brightness in this case, and that should give us colors. So that's a decent start. We can easily just erase this. We can start with our mid blue and fill in the sky, and that's a good start. You can always change these later, and I encourage you to, as you sort of find what you're doing. If you're just following the tutorial, you won't know whether you're going for sunset or beach, or, you know, at the morning or whatever it is. We're just going to go for cloud shapes today. I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold shift and drag across, and I'm just going to create a shape like this, right? So drawing essentially circles all the way across. I might prefer to put this on its own layer, so I'm going to hit W to select everything in this color. I'm going to hit Control X to cut it out. I'm going to hit Shift N to create a new layer, and then Control V to paste. That now puts my cloud on a separate layer to the background. If I hide the cloud, I can then fill in this background, and now I can just move my cloud wherever I want. If you were making a scene, the clouds would be sized relatively to the things in the scene, right? Depending on how far away the cloud is, etc. Here, it's kind of abstract. So let's clean this up a little bit. Let's go nice and flat on the bottom. The effect is that we want these circle shapes to be as like round as possible. And this is really good practice for you if you're learning pixel art. If you start with a straight line up and you want this to feel round, rather than going 1, 2, and then a bunch of diagonal lines and then a bunch of straight lines, that's going to feel like an edge. If you want it to feel round, you have to sort of make the transition from vertical pixels to horizontal pixels more smoothly. So you can go like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? That's going to feel more smooth. Now, it's not perfectly smooth, it's not perfectly round. If you just grab your brush tool and set it to a large size, you can sort of see the way that mathematically that's going to work out. So here you can see it's like for a circle of this radius, you know, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? So understanding that kind of relationship between the counts of pixels and sort of decreasing them in one direction, increasing them in the other, that's going to create that smooth look. If you go like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, like that, it's not going to feel consistent because we can see there's like a line here going this way, right? 1, 2, 3, you can see that, and you can see that same line here, 1, 2, 3, but then this kind of feels like it's its own separate thing, right? Going 1, 2 here, right? This kind of feels separate to that. Feels like we're going back the other way. Whenever we have pixels that are kind of out like that, you know, we call them like jaggies, right? It just doesn't look right, it doesn't look round or smooth. So applying that here, we want to do the same thing. Maybe this is looking a little bottom heavy, right? So maybe I can do that, but then, oh, now this looks a bit straight, so I could do this, right? And now that looks a little rounder. We could even cut this off here, and there, that's a nice shape. Once you've determined the overall shape that you want, you can start filling in these more rounder spaces and create your clouds. So once you're happy with that first layer, the next thing you want to do is do your second layer. What I'm going to use in Sprite, if you're using Sprite, is the shade tool. What that is it's part of the pencil tool. If you click this ink well, you can go down all the way to shading, and I've got that on a shortcut. So what I do is I go to my canvas, I hold shift and click these two, and then go to shading, and then you'll see them here. What that does is it allows me to basically create a shade that doesn't break outside of my shape, right? And that's really important here. We defined that shape first, we don't want to lose it. So now I'm able to kind of draw inside of that shape without losing the shape. And you can continue that process. You can actually add more colors and it will do it multiple times. But I recommend doing it mostly 2 at a time. Now we want to sort of create that fill color, okay? And that's going to basically be the same process as before, okay? So we're creating like a cloud within the cloud almost. And the distance that this color here is from this color here, you want to vary, right? Don't keep it exactly the same, otherwise it's going to feel like an outline. But you're just going to create like a silhouette shape here that kind of loosely follows the original shape, but is smaller and you know, sometimes strays towards the middle and sometimes is a little more further away from it. That's a good start. Now I want you to press X, which flips these two buttons here. And I want you to do the same thing another time, right? Inside that. So now we're drawing with the white inside of the blue, right? Another cloud shape. And you can press X again and do it one more time. And now we have sort of 3 layers of cloud, right? There's depth here in the cloud. And we're giving the impression that this sort of set of shapes here is in front of the darker areas here. So we've got depth by virtue of, you know, obscuring light, and we have depth by virtue of reflecting light from in front, right? That's going to make it feel nice and 3D and full. So from here, what I want to do is make it feel like it still abides by that first rule. So every time we see a line, we want it to follow that nice puffy kind of like made up of circles effect on the silhouette of that line. And also I want the internal shapes to feel a little bit more random, right? So that how they are formed, their sizes, their shapes, make them more varied. So we're just going to make sure that it's sort of still abiding by that original idea we had of rounded circles, mostly just caring about the top edges. Thinking about these empty spaces, we can add in cloud shapes that are only just visible to break up this space a little bit more. So we can add in just the top arcs of circles as well, right? It doesn't have to be a clear line all the way across. It can just be a kind of broken circle shape. Just cuts across like that. And we can kind of create that by eating into the silhouettes of earlier layers. So maybe we don't let this thing go all the way, we just break it up. And you don't have to do this last step. It's a different stylistic thing. It's up to you. And here I'm even varying it up so that we can sort of follow that line back into the shape below it. Opening the shape back up We created it in layers, but if you have unbroken paths of the same color all the way through, it makes it feel like the light is continuous, right? The shape is continuous all the way. It's rolling all the way forward rather than being stacks of cards. Okay. And I think, you could stop here and be very happy, I think. I really like the way this is looking. The next things you can do if you want to add a third color is be very subtle about some of these internal shapes and go, just a little bit, darker in some of the creases, right? You can add a little bit more depth and shadow. And that will make it feel just a little bit more full, and you would just put it where you see, quite a lot of the darkest tone. I wouldn't put it kind of anywhere near the brightest tone, and only in sort of like the creases. Every time you do anything in pixel art, if you want it to feel natural, as you go into more extreme colors, use less of them, right? It's nice to have larger, sort of like full shapes of the main colors, and you can add just a little bit of that contrast just where you want to create focus. And finally, you can soften off some of these corners with that middle color if you want as well. So just in there, that'll sort of allow that transition to feel a little softer. You can even increase it if you want. A little bit of anti-aliasing can go a long way. And there's your cloud. So if you're going to create a sky full of these clouds, my recommendation to you is to use a lot of varied sizes. You can do the same thing at a smaller scale, like this. You can even do little ones, little tiny baby clouds. There are some more things you can do. If this is on the horizon, right? This is near maybe there's an ocean underneath us. You can even start doing some shapes that are kind of more distant, right? Just the hints of clouds even further away in that space. If you're going to do this, like as soon as you break up that solid color of that background, you kind of have to be a little bit more careful about it, and you have to think about how you're going to transition from this solid color down into the white, because I feel like you either go full color or you think about that dithering and that blending. Just having the specks of these blue clouds here, like just one or two, something about it's not quite right, unless you stick really, really close to your cloud shapes, right? Unless you sort of keep it in that little perceptual space. If you start going out here, now it's like, well, why is there, a couple of shapes out there? It sort of begs to have more context shown. So you can, build out these shapes a bit more, and you can even think about, what does the sky look like further up into the sky? Is it darker up here, more atmospheric? And do we need extra colors between these two? Maybe between here and here. And if you hold Alt, the eyedropper, and you drag left and right, you can see over here the junction between those two, the distance. So if you pick the middle color between those two and add that to the list, now we can kind of drag this one between them, and you can now blend between the two with that shade brush tool. Okay, so now you can think about, okay, maybe it's more like this, something like that, and maybe now we can start thinking about those cloud shapes at the seams of these bigger shapes, right? Maybe now we can start blending between them. Right, I'm going to be very quick here because I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you can see the ideas popping in, right? Maybe it's all the way like this. Not keeping them even, right? The distributions between these are not even. We're kind of just transitioning from like one space to another. We're not doing like 30% of this color, 30% of this, and 30% of that. The even distribution, again, feels like banding. It feels like an algorithm. And the sky does not run on an algorithm. At least not one that's linear like that. So you can see kind of how I build out an entire sky from just one cloud shape. There's a bit more to this. I'm not going to go down the line with it, but you could think about perspective as well in this. You could start thinking about how, this point here is our horizon, and we could kind of go out from the horizon all the way up this way and start thinking about layers of clouds, right? Coming towards the camera. This is the underside of the clouds, and it's receding all the way back. Clouds are getting flatter and flatter and flatter as we go further and further into the background. And they're getting higher and more billowing as they approach the camera, right, and larger, these shapes. If we just think of it in two-tone, we could shade all the tops of this, but keep the underside as the majority of it, right? So the clouds are coming like up above us. So the clouds that are closer to us, we're seeing most of the underside of those clouds. And the clouds that are further away from us, we're seeing kind of more of the top of those clouds. You're seeing more of that shape that we were drawing earlier as you go down into the background. But they're becoming thinner and thinner as well because they're becoming closer and closer to the horizon. So that's another way of thinking about it as well. But all that's pretty advanced. I think if you can get this far, you should be really proud of yourself. And I would love to see how you go. If you happen to be interested in sort of sharing what you're working on, I currently have a Discord channel where we have an art showcase. And in my stream, I actually have like a widget that shows the actual work that you guys have been doing. So when I'm AFK or starting up the stream, you can see like a gallery of all the work that's been posted to the Discord. We've got a little bit of a community going on there. You're welcome to join us. If you see any gaps in my pixel art class catalog for simple things like this that I haven't gone into, I'd be happy to make little videos about them. Of course, I'm still working on Insignia full time, still working towards building a team and pushing that game towards release. And at the moment, I'm actually on a little bit of a side path, working on a post-game jam game called Chainmail. So that's it. That's the video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I've been Adam, you've been the Pixel Pals, and until next time.